Hey guys, and welcome back to Lost Bits, the series where we explore the unused, altered, and unseen content in gaming. It's been quite the year or so for Wario. Being an apparition, a puppet, appearing in Saturday Night Live, Wario's been a pretty busy guy. It's also been a hot minute since we got a new Warioware game as I make this video, so with the Nintendo Switch finally getting its iteration with Warioware Get It Together coming out really quick here, figured I'd revisit this glorious series once more, and this time going way back to the series roots with WarioWare Inc. for the Gameboy Advance and Gamecube. As always, if you end up enjoying this video, consider dropping a like down below to let me and YouTube's algorithm know, and of course subscribe if you'd like to find your way back for future videos. And with all of that said, go grab some garlic, cause it's Wario time! Let's go find some lost bits. Alright, let's first start things off with stuff exclusive to the original game that started it all for this awesome series, WarioWare Inc. Mega Microgame $sign for the Game Boy Advance. Now before we actually get to the final release of this version, there are some demo microgames found in Wario World, as well as some GameCube preview discs in which it seems that they are based on an earlier prototype build of the game. Although the extent of these demos is pretty limited, there are still a few differences seen in them compared to the final release. First of all, a few of the microgames accessible via Wario World have difficulty levels that aren't seen in the final. For these, we got going up to level 7 in Munch a Bunch with 24 shapes to eat, whereas the final version only goes up to level 3 with 12 shapes, getting up to level 6 in Dodgeballs with 7 balls present, while only 3 levels with up to 4 balls are seen in the final, and lastly, Repellion here can go all the way up to a whopping difficulty level 10 with 10 UFOs, while, once again, only a max of level 3 is seen in the final with 3 UFOs to match. Pretty much every microgame only has 3 difficulty levels in the final game, so it's unclear why these 3 can go higher in these demos. It does beg the question though as to if there were once plans to add more difficulty levels to at least a few of the microgames. There is, I believe, only one leftover exception to this in the final build, and that's for the Dodgeballs microgame I mentioned earlier, in which it has a total of 9 difficulty levels left in the game, but like I said, only 3 of them are normally accessible. It's currently unclear why only this microgame was chosen to have these unused difficulty levels left over, but yeah, who knows, it was probably an unintentional oversight. Anyways, next, there's a small difference seen here in these demos when pausing the game. Here, in this pre-release build, when pausing during a microgame, the screen will just get a tad darker, whereas in the final release, the gameplay goes completely dark. Next, although not unused or anything, just a bit of a fun fact, the boombox backdrop as we've been seeing in between microgames in this stage is actually based on the Sound Bomber mode from Mario Artist Polygon Studio, an exclusive game for the Nintendo 64 disc drive, which of course only released in Japan. Now at first I thought this was quite an obscure reference, but upon checking out some gameplay from that game, it seems like quite a few microgames were actually heavily inspired by it. So much so that it appears that this Sound Bomber mode is actually the predecessor to the entire WarioWare series. It's pretty cool. Anyways, this transitional area between microgames also sees a few small differences between the builds. Most notably is the transition animation between the microgames itself. The prototype one has quite a few fewer frames in its animation, resulting in it appearing much less smooth compared to the finished product. Additionally, as you can see here, Wario's nose immediately transitions from green to transparent in a single frame in the demo, whereas in the final version, a much more gradual transition is seen. Other small differences here include better shading being implemented, notably around the Wario screen, as well as on these little slits on the sides, making them that much more than just some white lines. Next, a few microgames also had some slight graphical adjustments between the builds. For example, in the Wario World microgame, in the demo the background is black as opposed to a very dark green as used in the final. The dodge instruction isn't changed to a question in the demo when the car is small or when it stops before driving in the other direction in the Crazy Cars microgame. And lastly, in this same microgame, in the demo build here, Wario still hasn't been given an idle animation for when he awaits the Sausage Mobile. Then, what I think is probably the most interesting thing found in one of these demo builds is a little sequence that plays out after reaching level 21 in the preview trial demo disc version. After completing the 20th microgame CM flashing, CM apparently being short for commercial. After this, the game essentially turns into an overt advertisement for itself for the next 8 or so microgames. The microgames continue to play, but now with some changes, as here the text and even a few of the graphics will be different than normal. Mentioning you can play it anytime and anywhere with the Game Boy Advance, how reasonable of a deal the game is considering it has over 200 microgames, the game's title, and just a bunch of other goofy and wacky ways to convince the player of the demo to actually buy the game. I just love how the developers even added some custom graphics to this little ad, and I don't think these are used anywhere else in this demo or otherwise. Like the E for Everyone ESRB rating car driving at Wario, the box art replacing the coins here, at least I think that's what these are, or the comically large mug mentioning the game's copious amounts of microgames. And I'm not gonna lie, that'd be a pretty sweet mug to drink some G Fuel out of. Honestly, I think it's a really cool way to advertise the game this way. Not that I needed convincing, but hey, this would have definitely worked on me. Anyways, last up for these demo builds is that quite a few of the sound effects sound pretty different when compared to the final release, as a different sound font is used between the builds. In the interest of time, I won't be going over all of them, but I've picked out a few which show the biggest differences. But as always, if you are interested in listening to all of them for yourself, I'll leave a link to the cutting room floor page down in the description. Anyways, let's have a quick listen here. And now, finally, let's move on to the final releases of this game. For the most part, the unused things appear in both the GBA and Gamecube releases of the game, so I'll just cover them together here. Firstly, just like we saw back in the Smooth Moves video, here too a few regional differences are seen. Although admittedly, some aren't as interesting, like simple translations or just adding an extra period to the end of this SOS message, we do also get more interesting changes like the diamond in the Fruitfall microgame originating as a literal pile of shit in the Japanese version. Rob the Robot's colors are different in the Japanese version to match the Famicom release. The background for this microgame was originally like a dark red color, not sure why this subtle change was made. Then, for strictly the European releases of this game, the great message seen in the lift and shout minigame was changed to an image of an arm flexing, and the goal line here in Snowboard Slalom was changed to a checkered flag. It's likely that in both of these last two cases, this change was made as since the goal and great messages were in English, it would have been much more work localizing the graphics to each of the supported European languages in the game. And I guess it was just easier to use a more universal one instead. Alright, next let's move on and talk about some more unused audio files left in the game. There are quite a few unused audio tracks, and again, in the interest of time, I'll just be focusing on a few here. And also to clarify, all of these are specifically those from the GBA release. First is this weird unused a cappella rendition of the intro to the theme from Super Mario Bros. Not exactly sure where it was intended for, but my best guess would be either for the Super Mario or Super Wario Bros. Microgames. The next are a pair of unused tracks, which, based on their file names, appear to be from a scrapped boss fight microgame with q-WAH-lity. Now, I don't believe q-WAH-lity is ever referred to by name anywhere in the international releases of this game, but the Leafy Greens microgame is known as q-WAH-chan no Daiboken, which translates to Little q-WAH-'s Big Adventure. So I guess this little snail fella here is q-WAH-lity. Whether q-WAH-lity here was once planned to appear in a boss fight microgame or something isn't 100% clear, but again, based on these file names, I'd reckon so. What is clear though is that I think we definitely need more adventures with q-WAH-lity. Then in a similar fashion, there are a total of 3 unused background audio tracks for a supposedly scrapped Wario Land themed microgame. Each of these contains the iconic segment from the theme from the first Wario Land game, and given this and the name of the files, it's likely there was once a planned Wario Land microgame. Why it didn't make the cut is, again, unfortunately unclear, and surprisingly, a Wario Land-themed microgame wouldn't make an appearance in the series all the way up until WarioWare Smooth Moves. Anyways, moving on from that, here is a small sample cross-section from a few more of the many audio files that don't get used here.
Good night.
And now, let's move on to some unused graphics, which, thankfully, based on the number of microgames, this game has an above-average amount of, to say the least. So, buckle up, we got lots to go through. I'll try to get through these as expediently as I can. We got this placeholder, now paintig graphic. I guess they couldn't fit the N at the end to spell painting. This smaller thumbnail image of Jimmy T paired with a white cell phone folder. There's a leftover early version of Wario's jumping sprite from Crazy Cars, as well as a 1-up graphic also from that microgame. Then next is this unused closed fist graphic for the Saving Face microgame. In this microgame, only the bottom hand is ever seen fully closed when missing the grab. Then there's this unused indicator graphic for both Repellion and UFO Assist, which would show which ship you control. There's these unused, more rounded graphics for Diamond Dig's border, as well as a white pillar thing. There's this AU graphic meant for Baseline Bash. Then there's what appears to be a placeholder clear line graphic for High Hoops. Not really sure what its purpose could have been, given the nature of the microgame. Maybe a certain height the player must be above to get the ball in the hoop or something. Then we got these idle and walking graphics for the fella in Mountain Mountain, an unused pose for the border in Snowboard Slalom, unused Game Over graphic for the introductory boombox stage, as well as both unused Game Over and speed up graphics for the dribble and spit stage, unused graphics for a spinning ring animation for Bubble Trouble, an unused enemy orb accompanied by 13 different types of also unused projectiles from the Space Escape game. Then we got an unused power-up for Galaxy 2003, as well as what looks to be a beam of some sort, perhaps the type of ammo the power-up was planned to provide. Then there's graphics for Gold Nuggets in Gold Digger, this image of a girl for Fries with That, this small pink ball meant for Tilt and Tumble, graphics for an unused blue balloon in the Balloon Fight game, graphics for a pipe in the Super Mario Bros. Game, then there's an unused set of numbers, some unused corn cobs, unused flower colors, and the girl from Flower Shower not holding a watering can. Then we got pink poop, this work sign, the reason 6 was afraid of 7, a quarter and some eighth notes for float your boat, as apparently Wario was supposed to whistle after landing. Then we got some additional unused graphics for the Mario Bros. Game, like for a POW block, some numbers, as well as Mario and Wario taking a hit. Then we got a few more sets of unused numbers, there's this unused basic Nintendo logo, and then last but certainly not least, something I'm sure many of us weren't ever expecting or wanting to see, but this game contains some unused graphics of Wario
in the nude.
Yeah, I'm not even joking here. There are these unused graphics apparently meant for the WarioWare microgame. I guess initially maybe the developers had Wario starting nude instead of already in some undergarments. This was obviously changed to keep the game rated E for everyone, and yeah, that probably would have raised a few questions as to where this poll here is going. But yeah, I don't know man, the developers of these games were really something else, I tell ya. Anyways, those are the graphics that go completely unused, but this game also has a few graphics that, while they technically do go used, they either have a different color palette or they contain bits that are normally never seen by the player, as they are either obscured or are hidden out of the screen's normal bounds. For example, for both the Donkey Kong and Duck Hunt microgames, only a portion of the graphic used can be seen in the game. Then for Classic Clash, there's a leftover color palette resulting in Discount Mario and Bowser here having colors more familiar to us than the orangey and blue normally seen. For Galaxy 2003, just off screen is a hidden row of colors that I certainly wouldn't use in a logo or anything. Hidden in Wario Facial is Wario's lower segment, including his pants, belt, and hands. And finally, for the helmet Game & Watch game, hidden to the right of the house here is the word home, written in English, and I assume Japanese as well, if anyone can confirm that. Like I said earlier, not a big surprise at the number of unused graphics here, given how many individual microgames are in this game. But that said, here we got both quantity and, well, maybe just quantity. And for the last stop of this video here, I've saved what I think is the best for last, and this is actually several unused microgames that never made the cut in the final release. Thankfully, these are all still left over in the game and can be easily accessed with a cheat code. The first of these is a microgame based on the Famicom game F1 Race. Based on this, it's likely that this microgame was planned to be a part of 9Volt's assortment. Despite the heads-up display graphic at the top here being clearly unfinished as it's non-functional, this microgame still has 3 distinct difficulty levels programmed, with level 1 just being a straight road, level 2 shaking things up with a slight curve halfway, and finally level 3 starts off curved but then straightens out towards the end. The next unused microgame is one based on an early Nintendo arcade game, Block Fever. And as such, just like the previous one, this one too was probably meant for 9V stage. In this microgame, you basically just have to not let the ball drop and the paddle decreases in size with each difficulty hike. The next unused microgame is a variation of Pong, which, you guessed it, is once again probably scrapped from 9Volt's video game themed microgames. Here the second difficulty reduces the paddle size, and the third difficulty level introduces a second paddle for each side. And finally, the last unused microgame here is Ping Pong Versus, which, just based on the name alone, appears to be a Versus microgame that was cut. For those that don't know, the Versus microgames here were a really novel concept for the Game Boy Advance. Essentially, they were multiplayer games in which 2 players would share a single GBA, with each player holding one side and controlling the game with either the R or L button respectively. Anyways, this scrapped Ping Pong Versus microgame is essentially just Pong, with 2 inline paddles per side. First player to get 5 points wins. Now it is just Pong, sure, but I feel like it still would have been a welcome addition to the game and a fun one to play with a friend, so I think it's a shame it didn't make it into the final, especially considering it's essentially ready to go. The same goes for the rest of the microgames, save for the heads-up display in the F1 race game. These all appear pretty much ready to go, and considering they're actually left over in the game as it is, I can't really think of many good reasons why these got the snips. Anyways, that's about it for Warioware of the incorporated variety, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to check out some more of my lost bits, like my video on Warioware Smooth Moves. That game is awesome. And as always, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in today, and I will see you in a bit.